Welcome to this episode of the Gunman. In this video I'll be taking you through how to do a spot repair on this Mercedes Benz GL350 CDI, and we're painting it in Calcite White. That's the name of the colour. Paint code is 9650. You could also just type in 650 into a colour search and it would come up with the same colour. So I started off at the very start there. I was just assessing the damage and making sure that there was no dents or high spots or low spots that I needed to remove. As it turned out, it was just in the paintwork, so we're just going to have to sand it back and re-prime it and continue on with the spot repair. Had there been high or low spots, I might have got the heat gun onto it and shaped the panel, shaped the plastic back, or filled it up with some filler need be. So I just started off there also by putting some tape around the edges, just so I'm not going to hit that with my sandpaper. And then with the orbital sander I put on some 320 grit. So I decided I didn't want to go too coarse to start off with, as if you can go up to 180, but I don't like going much coarser than 180 on plastic because it can make the plastic go all furry, and it can make it harder to prime, or it can make it that it's going to need a lot of primer to fill up the furry parts, which sometimes panel beaters, it's a little bit annoying. They just rip out with some 80 grit and they rip into a bumper bar, and it just takes a lot of time and effort to get it back to a nice finish. So just continuing on with that 320, it might take a touch longer than in the initial step, but later on it'll end up saving you a bit of time. It turns out that I'm only going to have to put 2 coats of primer on this just to seal it down, so we're not having any bare plastic exposed. So this is our primer step, and I'm using 500 grit softback sanding sponge here, just to go around any of the surrounding areas, just to make sure that my primer is going to stick too. So with this video I'll take you right through totally every step, start to finish. I've edited the video down, sped it up here and there to give you a good look at exactly how to do this job. I take you right through the polishing and even give you a quick look at the colour. So yeah, just continuing on with that 500 grit softback sanding sponge there, just going over all those shiny spots. It's pretty important. I've also got some troubleshooting later on. Once we get into the booth, we've got some. We had a bit of an issue with some paint frying up or lifting up, and there's been a guy that's been asking me for quite some time now to do a video on fry ups, how they happen, why they happen, and how to fix them. So hopefully you're watching, mate. This is the first time I've actually had the opportunity to make something like that, and it's just included in this video. So just going around, remasking. So I'm just going to leave that the initial masking I put on there for sanding, and I'm just masking over the top of that with this. So this is masking to prime. Just going around, making sure you're not going to get any overspray. You don't want. I've always taught when I started that you're better off having your tape overlapping the panel a little bit more than to get overspray. That's with the primer stage, and the other way around when it comes to paint. So we've got this front section here as well, and it turned out all I did on that part was just hand sanded it for the prep work. There was no need to get the orbital sander on it. It was just a very light scrape. Throwing the plastic over the entire car, opening it up, make sure it's up the right way as well. It's pretty good, this plastic. It's quite cheap, and it sticks to the car pretty easily. It's got a static reaction, so then I'm just going around that edge there with a false edge. I'm just flipping that lead edge over there, running it across my knee, as I don't have a hard edge line up against there. Making sure I left that in for you guys, just to make sure you always mask up the wheels. I see a lot of guys in this entire workshop. It was something that I was very surprised when I started working here. I thought, wow, no one covers up wheels when they prime. It's like, well, I wouldn't like primer overspray all over my wheels, so it's one thing I always got onto the boys about. I said, oh, wait, mask up your wheels, and yeah, just always on them about it. So first up there, you saw me putting some plastic primer just over those bare plastic parts. I then walked away, let that flash off for about 5 minutes, and mixed up my 2-pack primer, and then I'm putting that first coat of 2-pack primer on. So I slowed it back down to normal speed when I'm priming, so you guys can get a bit more of a better look at my technique, and I do the same thing when I'm painting, slow it back down a bit. So putting those infrared drying lights on it, because this way I can actually paint the car the same day that I've primed it. Sometimes we do the prime ups at the end of the day, leave the primer dry overnight. So that's something that happens when you're using the infrared lights. This is just normal masking tape. If you have the green 3M masking tape, that's actually designed for higher temperatures than this masking tape, so it can actually withstand the infrared drying lights a little bit better, but we don't stock it here. And it's something that doesn't really get used very often, because we don't really dry primer with the UV lights that often, or sorry, the infrared lights that often. And once that primer stage is done, I've baked the entire job out for about 45 minutes, give or take, and I've then moved the lights over to the other side, and I can start prepping this job up, this side up. And I'm just starting off there with some Menzerner is the brand of the polish I'm using, and it's just the final glaze, and that's around the area where I'm going to be blending the clear coat. So I'm doing this in clear over base. That's just a quick look at the colour. I mixed it up through the machine, through the Standox mixing bank, and using the computer to tell me the formula, and then double check the colour. It turned out it was pretty good. There's no need to make any adjustments to it. For this job I made up 180 mils. Truth be told, I probably would have only needed 80 mils, but you lose accuracy when you mix up such a small amount. So say that if in 200 mils there was 1 gram of black, and then in 100 mils it's going to be 1 gram of black, then it's too hard. It can't calculate the formula 100%. So they tell you 250 mils, but I found 180 is still quite accurate. And yeah, now I'm just sanding the entire car down. So there you just saw me sand the primer section with 600 grit. I then went over all the primed areas with 500 grit soft pad. Any blend areas, I used 800 grit soft pad. And then over the very edge where I'm going to do my clear blend, I use grey Scotch Brite. So it's important you use the grey Scotch Brite. You don't want to use the red or the green, or because the colours determine how coarse they are. So the colour determines the grit when you come to the Scotch Brite pad. So next up I gave it a wipe down, which you saw me do just before. Now I've got it into the spray booth and we're doing our masking. I also gave it a good blow down with the high pressure there. Once we've got our edges all masked up, we're then throwing a bit of plastic over the entire car. Same thing, make sure it's up the right way. If it's not, the paint will start flaking off it. Just razor blading around the edges. Some people feel more confident masking with the paper, and you may ask me, hey, why did you use paper when you are priming it, but now you're just going straight over with the plastic? There is a reason. When we're masking outside of the spray booth, and also using the infrared lights, those infrared lights would have absolutely melted the shit out of the plastic if I had a mask it like this. So the paper is a better insulator. And the other reason is that when it's out there in the workshop, I can pull that piece of plastic off that I put over this car. We can then reuse it on the next car. Sometimes you can get 2 or 3 jobs out of the one piece of plastic. So once all that masking's done there, I went around that false edge, around that line where that body mold is, and then I'm using, this is a bit of a tight little molding there, which we decided not to pull off, and I use the blue fine line tape there, so it's not going to have such a big thick edge there. And just going around this front molding too. Now some people might look at this video and say, oh, you're a hack, mate, you know, that's a really nice car, what are you doing a spot repair on a car like this, you should pull the whole bar off. But you know what, my boss is actually a really nice guy. He likes to save people money. This customer comes in, my boss goes, I don't know how much, but it's probably a few $100s to get this done compared to $1,000 plus if he had have pulled the entire job off. So my boss likes to save people money. We can do this, and there's nothing wrong with this. So yeah, I would like to. I'm not going to get involved in whether or not you should be doing stuff like this. I think that it's great to know how to do it if you do need to do it. So that's why I make these videos for you guys. I've got some guys that actually sending me some feedback saying that they love these spot repair videos. So let me know what you guys think. What kind of videos you prefer. So now we're starting to paint. I've slowed the video back down to 1x speed, just again so you can have a look at my technique a little bit better. So I wiped the entire job down with wax and grease remover just before. That's what you were watching me do just then. And then I tack rag the whole thing with the yellow tack cloth. And now just going on with our first coat of base coat. You can see it covers really quite well. The whites and most of the colours with Standox solvent base covers quite well, but a few of the greens and the reds are the exception, and some of their silvers too, but on the whole it's quite good. Now what happened there is I'm about to go and put my second coat of base coat on, but then I had a bit of a closer look. I said, oh, what the hell is that? So that is what we call a fry up. So basically what's happened is my fresh base coat has softened up the paint underneath. So it's got underneath there, the solvents have got underneath the original paint, and it's made it lift up. So how do we fix this now? I walk out for a good 20 minutes, walked out of the booth, just forget about it. I think I went in and helped my mate do some masking for 15-20 minutes. Come back in, and then I'm just scraping away the completely affected areas, the worst parts of it. You can see it's not just where I did my repair. So I did my repair on the black area, and it's not just there, it's also just underneath it where the original paint was still there. So this is something to do with the paint that is on this car from factory. They might use a cheap quality plastic primer or something like that. So I was just using 500 grit there. You could decide to re-prime this, but that's going to take a hell of a lot longer, depending on how bad it was, what colour it was, and being solid colour white, it's going to be quite forgiving. Had this have been a silver, I nearly just about would have had to have re-primed that, would have had to just stop and spot prime that section, but the colour is going to be quite forgiving. So just dusting my coats on now. If I go back straight away and put real heavy coats on, it will actually cause more dramas. It's more likely that it will re-fry up. So yeah, just if you do get stuff like that, just dust it on and then let it dry, put another dusty coat on and let it dry again. So, well, that brings us up to our clear coat now that that's done. And you just took notice of the technique that I was doing on the blend coat of base coat. So the gun I'm using here is the brand new Anest Iwata Bellaria with the W-400-BA4-2 Air Cap on it. I really love this gun, just got it a couple of weeks ago, and it'll be featuring in a few more videos to come. so I'll do some reviews and demos for you guys. Pressure settings on this I like to use is about 2 bar. You don't want to go much higher than 2 bar. You're just going to use more paint. You go much lower and you're going to get a lot more orange peel with it. And fluid setting, I like to have it set to about 2.5 turns out, so wind the fluid right in, come out 2.5 turns, and I like to have the fan wound right open. And I find with those settings it hums along really nicely and gets a real nice finish. So once you've got that second coat of clear, I'm just careful not to come too far up to that masking, and with that masking I did actually mask across the bumper bar using the false edge there, so we don't want to come right up to that masking. I did that so that we don't have overspray coming up the rest of the bumper bar. So just this gun here is just got blending reducer in it. I'm using a DuPont brand, AK350. It's great stuff. It's cheap. It comes in a big 5 litre can, so it lasts for ages. And yeah, so what I was doing there is so I'm to get my head down into the light. So whites can be hard to actually see the reflection. So actually one of the harder colours to paint because they don't get the reflection of the lights as much as the darker colours do. So you really want to make sure you get your head down and have a good look at the orange peel you're left with and the way that the blend has faded out. Obviously just careful not to put too much of that thinner on because it will run, because it's quite thin, a lot more prone to running, which is why I actually use the smaller gun, the minigun. So I forgot to do that little blend up the top there, which I ended up doing after the video stopped running. That's a bit of a look at the gun. I'll get you up and close and have a look at the paint job soon too. So that blended out quite nice, and we've only got a few more minutes left, which will take us through the polishing stage. Back up to 1.5 times speed here. So I'm using the Juice is the name of the brand of this this cutting compound, and Super C is the product. It's a great product, this one. It cuts in real nice. It's got a good cut into it. Yeah, you can cut up 2,000 grit scratches really easily. You can even go up to the 1,500 grit. I find it you don't get so many cutback marks either, coming back a few days later after you've cut them. So just using the mini buff on this, no need to use the big buff. It turns out I ended up just doing the entire bumper bar for it because it's got the dual exhaust on this car, and sometimes the exhaust fumes can end up spraying up over the bumper bars on people's cars, so I ended up just polishing the whole bar and getting that smoky black colour off the entire bar. The guy should be really happy with his car when he got it back. What happened here was just a touch of overspray actually. They mustn't have masked it properly, but all we do here, we've got our tungsten block and just shave that overspray off, and that comes off straight away. I then run that mini buff back over it, and you'd never know it was there. And that's definitely a better method to using razor blades, less chance of scratching it, and absolutely a better way than sanding it off. So I did leave this overnight before I gave it a polish. If you wanted to leave it overnight, you'd probably want to give it a good 45 minutes in the oven first, and then you might even want to just check it, like put your fingernail into the clear coat, make sure it's nice and hard. If it still feels a little bit gummy, then maybe you could just go and put those heat lights back onto it, say for another half an hour to an hour. So I slowed it back down here, and just so you can have a look at this blend area. And I reckon it came out really quite nice. It blended out quite nice after the polish, and this is the car when it's finished off. Owner should be really wrapped with it when he gets it back. And there's a couple of other bids here at the end. If you haven't already seen them, check them out. If you've already seen them, check out my channel. I've got some good playlists there. And yeah, thanks again for watching. This has been another Gunman production. Goodbye.